Welcome to the Stress-Free Finance Show. I'm attorney Anthony DeLuca. In a world where corporate America, with the assistance of the politicians, have stacked the deck against the average American, it's important that we as parents financially educate our children to be sophisticated enough not to be taken advantage of by the banking industry. That's why we are having on our show today Denise Winston. She's a personal finance expert, and she specializes in teaching children how to be financially responsible. So stick around. It's going to be a great show.
From our studios in Las Vegas, this is Stress-Free Finance with Anthony DeLuca.
Our question of the week comes from Janet. Janet wants to know, if she does a loan modification, will the bank reduce the principal amount that's owed on the loan? And the flat out answer is no. Banks are not reducing principal. A lot of the advertisements you'll hear will claim that they're getting their principal reduced, but really what they're talking about is eliminating a second mortgage, which can be done in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. But 99.9% of the cases, if you think you're going to go to the bank and ask them to reduce your first mortgage down to the market value, it's not going to happen, and you're wasting your time. Welcome to Stress-Free Finance. Today we have Denise Winston. She's the founder of Money Start Here, and she's a personal finance expert. She's got some great information to us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Anthony.
So when you got started in being a personal finance expert, where did that background begin?
Well, number one, living on my own since I was 16 and starting to work in a bank when I turned 18. So for 25 years, I worked day in and day out with mass America's personal financial habits. And I got to see how the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. And over time, I started volunteering in the classroom and seeing a huge need for financial education. There's a big gap we have. Unfortunately, only 10% of the American population receives financial education, what I talk about, the basics, credit, banking, financial organization. So when I started seeing this big gap and we started having this financial crisis, I really started spending time with my employees and volunteering in the classroom, because what I found was that I had a hard time finding employees to hire because they didn't have a good financial background. And then I also had a difficulty finding good consumers. So that's kind of how things evolved. I took what I learned on my own, living on my own since I was 16, and then also what I saw in my day-to-day life as a banker for 25 years.
Now, 25 years in banking, that's obviously a really, really long time. At what point in that career did start to occur to you that maybe I should put this down on paper, or maybe I should do some videos or putting some learning materials together?
Well, I started volunteering in the classroom with Junior Achievement, and that kind of progressed, and I started doing the Careers in Finance with a regional occupational center. And for 15 years, I was in the classroom delivering content. And as things progressed, every year it got more and more and more substantial. And then I had more and more kids coming to me later, seeing me in the community and saying, what you gave me was so substantial, I can't thank you enough. So about 2 years before, when we were in this financial crisis, 2 years ago, I started saying, I need to do this. And one day I just said, I'm going to have it filmed. And so I filmed the DVD and the workbook and put it together. And then that way, parents and teachers, if I can't be there, then they would have a way to deliver content. And, teens oftentimes don't listen to their parents or their teachers or their principals or pastors. And I'm like that safe person that they can hear me. I'm just safe. And I'm just telling them, hey, look, I've lived on my own since I was 16. You're going to deal with money every day of your life. And over time, it just kind of progressed. And before you knew it, I resigned from the bank, and I'm doing this full time as a professional speaker.
That's fantastic. And one of the things I love about your programs, which you don't see a lot, is that there's so many of these personal finance gurus out there trying to teach you how to become a millionaire. And all they're really doing is they're selling books and they're making themselves a millionaire.
Yep.
But what you're doing is you're teaching children financial education, which I think is fantastic. And that's why, among all the guests we've had on the show, I was looking forward to getting you on here, because I think the material is just absolutely great. So why is it that teaching education to children is such a passion for you?
Well, number one, I've lived on my own since I was 16. And what I found was that I didn't think anybody cared. And I also there were no resources for me. And this was not a choice on my own. I just found myself, my parents were off doing their own thing. And so I can connect with these kids in a way. It's very difficult to be a teenager, number one. It's very difficult to live on your own and try and go to school, and you've got boys and you've got grades and you've got all these things. And then, so when they look at me, they can see that I made it. And if I could make it under those circumstances, then they can too. And if you capture kids at the right time, over the 15 years when I was in the classroom, I found that just before the kids were graduating, I had their full attention because they were going to go out into the real world. And I was able to connect with them on a way. And when they come up afterwards and they say that my story really inspired them and gave them hope, and then you see them in the community, you know that you're making an incredible difference. And that just feeds you more to go out and do more. So,
which leads me to my next question, which is, I have a 5-year-old boy, and he's just starting to get some of the correlations about money. I mean, the very basics. Like, he's just starting to understand that use money to buy, well, for him, toys and DVDs and Diego.
Games.
Right. But he gets the idea that you need money to buy things. And he's also starting to get the correlation between, why does Daddy go to work? Well, Daddy goes to work to get the money to buy the toys and games. So at what age do you think you should start them?
Well, I love what you just said, is that, Anthony, you're giving your son money, or he understands that there's some correlation, because I'm a parent as well. My daughter's 21, and I started very early on, about 15. I lost my mother, and all of a sudden I realized that if something ever happened to me, was my daughter going to be able to survive? Okay, so I started aggressively with plan. And what I hear from you is that your son is 5 and you're already addressing this issue. I believe 5 is a great time. Even if you're not using currency, you can still teach your kids the value of money. If you don't want to use money, then you can use those little tickets that you'd get at a fair, the coupon, and you can allocate some of those for them to be able to watch TV, to play video games, to do something so that they understand that they're exchanging something. When they're young like that, you can say give them $1 a week, but give them small denominations, dimes, nickels, quarters. It helps with math skills. This also helps with fractions. This helps with, delayed gratification, that they must save up, and you can do different size jars. There's all kinds of fun, exciting things that you can do with your child from an early age. The earlier the better. I mean, to be quite frank, I think that you can create really good scenarios for them to learn how to deal with money and the value of that. Even if you gave them $1 to go to the store, we have a lot of dollar stores around. If you gave them $1 to go into the store, let them pick something. When they get up to the cash register and there's tax, you let the clerk speak directly to the child instead of butting in and let them realize they don't have enough money. Then you're enlisting other people to teach your child, and it's a much more, memorable experience for them. And that's what I like to do, is have fun, educational times to build relationships with your children and really help them, because the unfortunate thing is they're going to deal with money every day of their life. And when your son was born, he could just lie there, right? Then he could roll over, then he could sit up, and then he could pull himself up and then walk and run. And that's what happens with money. We must create many, many opportunities for them to really experience money and have to save it and have to spend it.
I mean, wouldn't you agree that with the consumer culture that we have, that it's so important to start them at a young age, because corporate America is addressing them at such a young age? I mean, we turn on the cartoons on, for us it used to be Saturday morning. Now they have cartoons every day of the week. I don't know when that started, but when they're watching television, I mean, those commercials are aimed at the kids. I mean, the Star Wars toys come on the television. Dad, I want that. Or the Transformers, cereals. I mean, they're targeting the kids at 5. So isn't that even more important why we should start them so young at understanding that there's
Absolutely.
a cost for
There's
this?
a cost for them, and they need to understand the value of money. Just like as we get older, oftentimes we forget that in order to buy that cup of coffee for $5 with a muffin, we may have to work a half an hour net pay to get that. Kids need to understand how many hours they would need to work in the real world in order to get something. Because with ATM machines, with credit cards, money looks like it drops out of the sky. And so we have to really give our kids, they need to understand the money piece itself as cash before you transition into anything else. And that's why I think allowance is very powerful, and really giving your kids control, because kids don't have control of much, right? But they want control. They want to be independent. And what I can tell you is that when we as parents do not take the time to invest in our children and teach them money as a life skill, we are robbing them of self-respect, of independence, of so many things in life. And I find money can be a control factor for many parents. But if we wait until they're 18 and we expect them to pick it up when they're 18, and then we're annoyed when they keep coming back to us for money, we've really dropped the ball and not given them skills, because nobody in our communities are teaching this. And that's why I do speaking engagements at high schools, colleges, at corporations, to really give people the skills that they need. It can be fun. It can be, money can be a boring subject, but I like to make it fun and entertaining. And there's lots of fun ways and stories that you can explain stuff.
Now, right now, we've been talking about the very small children. We're going to move on to some of the teens and some of the other areas. But if you had to pick a single first lesson, like you're talking about, you want to get your children started young. If you had to pick one first lesson to start with, what would be a great tip for the viewers?
It would be specifically give your kids lots of experiences with money. So allowance, just what we're talking about. I think that any allowance or coupons or any type of commodity that you can trade, it could be bottle tops, whatever you have in your home that you can start bartering and then maybe graduate to money. But I think the number one thing we have to do is teach our kids how to budget money or have a spending plan and create circumstances for them to either have to save or spend. Delayed gratification is good. We're in such immediate culture.
Right.
The microwave's not even fast enough. And when we want to just give our kids to maybe pacify them, to satisfy them, because we want to give to them because we didn't have,
right.
That's really, we have to learn to delay gratification, and we have to earn the right to enjoy something, right? So I would say spending plan.
Now, I know you mentioned in your videos, when I was going through them, you talked about when you set a budget, you said actually sitting down, even though your teen's not moving out, but you actually sat down with the newspaper and said, look, here's what an apartment costs, here's what utility bills cost, here's what a car payment costs. If you have X number of dollars, how would you do this? And I found that to be really interesting, because what we learn as teenagers is what we carry into adulthood, and some people, those lessons are never learned.
They are never taught. They're nowhere in our society and in our culture. Our grandparents, they had it. And somehow through the years we've lost it, and it's not become, there are very few programs out there that teach this. And I think for early teenagers, they get that cocky attitude and they get a little aggressive, especially during spring break or summer break or the holiday season. They need something to do, and I think that's a great time to sit down with them and say, go through the newspaper and tell me how much an apartment is. Tell me how much groceries would cost, or maybe even have them go to the store and cook one meal, so they at least get a grasp of how much things really do cost. It's imperative that they get this.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, as a bankruptcy attorney, I go through budgets. I mean, I've gone through tens of thousands of budgets with individuals, and one thing that's always amazed me is that people don't realize how much money they spend. I mean, they get the big items. If you ask them, well, what does your budget consist of? Well, I have a house payment, it's $1,500. I have a car payment, it's $400. I pay $300 for my electric bill. Right. But that's not really the devil's in the details. I mean, it's the Starbucks that they spend $4 on every morning. It's the amount they spend when they fill up their gas tank. It's what they spend at fast food at lunch. So, I mean, I think a big part of it, I'm sure you would agree, is that when you're going through your budget, it's so important that you detail the expenses. And I know your videos, I've referenced a large list, and the workbooks do as well. But, I mean, they really have to sit down and figure out everything from their car insurance, their car payments, to what they spend just on the impulse buys. And
this is what our kids don't understand. I would have many kids come into the bank and they'd drop their keys on my desk along with a really nice smartphone. And I would see the key. You can always tell what they're driving. So I'd say, how much is that car payment? I don't know. How much is your insurance? I don't know. What's your plan on your cell phone? I don't know. How much was the cell phone? I don't know. So unfortunately, sometimes the parents don't even realize for their children. So then you have activities, you have lunches, you have yearbook, you have football games, those are all in the details, but you don't think about them when you're running a household budget, and they have to be accounted for. Clothing, tennis shoes, sporting goods, they're all there. So yes, you're right. You have to know where you are. Unfortunately, we live in a society that does not promote that.
Right. And when we talk about credit card debt and people buying, and you were mentioning how there's delayed gratification, well, I think the credit card industry has pretty much eliminated delayed gratification. They have allowed people to live several tiers for a while above where they really should be. And one thing I've found is that many people they'll keep playing the shell game where they'll run up a credit card and they'll get another bigger credit card and they'll balance transfer and they'll run that up. And pretty soon, the amount they're paying in interest exceeds what they could possibly pay. Where at that point, it actually becomes mathematically impossible to get out of debt.
Yep.
And what I would love to see people do is, they could have come into my office, and if they needed to resolve their financial problems a year before, but because they haven't sat down and done the budget, they haven't sat down and figured out, well, just on my basic expenses, I'm $200 short. How am I ever going to pay off the credit card debts? I can't even begin to pay the interest, yet the principal and interest.
And this is why I did a DVD, because I realize as a banker dealing with mass America, very few people will pick up a book or pick up the phone to come into your office to address these issues. So in my DVD, I simply go through and ask people to jot down the numbers, because it's daunting to look at this form, to have to fill it out. You just go, not right now.
Right.
So it is important to just have a casual number in your head. And then once you get that number, then you can start doing the math and realizing that you might be 200. I have had clients that are literally $2,000 a month in the hole, and every month they're charging $2,000 more, and they didn't even know it because they've never sat down. They don't want to. It's heavy. It's, I'd rather go self-medicate with some retail therapy, or let's go to dinner or something. It's a little easier to do. But specifically, that's why I did DVDs, because people don't want to sit down and I made these so people could watch them doing laundry, cooking dinner, whatever. So it's not quite so icky.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite quotes is Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And one thing I want to make perfectly clear to the audience, and they're listening, is when you find yourself in a situation where your 401k becomes a revenue source, then you really have to sit down and revisit your finances.
Or your credit cards. What I think has happened is that people have gotten away from a savings.
Right.
They now see their credit card as a financial spare tire, right? So, and then it becomes more of their vehicle over time. So when they first started, it was just in case something emergency happened. And then over time, they start saying, oh, well, that's really comfortable. I'll just go with it all the time. And then you're so addicted and you don't know exactly what's going on. You're down this road and you have to stop. One of my favorite tips for people is to sit down and chart out your credit cards and also put the amount that the finance charge is. I have a new product coming out very soon and I can't wait for it to happen. But sit down and put what the finance charge is and what the minimum balance is. And then make a plan to pay them off and put all your credit cards in an envelope. And on the outside, you have to write all of the icky feelings, how it affected your relationships, how it affected your productivity at work, how you lost sleep, your high blood pressure. You put that on the outside of the envelope, and when you're tempted to spend again, you have to read in your own words exactly what that debt has caused and how it has impacted your life.
Yeah, I mean, if you look statistically over the past 50 years, what I find to be this amazing phenomena is that 50 years ago, people had a lot less in terms of their
but had a lot more.
creature comforts. Yeah, they didn't have the second cars, they didn't have the microwaves, they didn't have all the gadgets and iPhones and iPads. But now, 50 years later, we have all these things, but our divorce rate's gone over 50%. And this is the big one for me: is depression levels have gone up tenfold, and even higher among women. So depression levels among men have gone up tenfold, and even greater among women. So I just find that to be
and money has a huge implication on that.
When people are working 60 hours a week to pay for this mortgage they can't afford and could never afford from day number one, and they're paying for the car, and they're coming home and they're bringing all the stress from the finances and from the extra work to their relationships, it's not hard to see how we have this fallout. But it's such a contradiction in terms that we have more but enjoy so much less.
And I think the critical question is to ask yourself, do I need to make more or desire less? And when you make that conscious decision that you need to just desire less, interestingly enough, I have found, not only for personal experience, but many of working with clients, they end up making more because they're in a different place psychologically. They're like, okay, I'm just going to cut back on my spending. I'm going to cut back on my eating out. I'm going to really look into my home instead of looking outside of my home. If you can bring back some family dinners and you can bring back, game night or whatever, some old-fashioned things, it really does help someone get it back together.
And isn't it far easier for people, if they want to get themselves to a place where they have a greater degree of simplicity and more happiness and less stress, it's far easier to cut expenses than it is to make more money, particularly in this economy.
Absolutely. And I see so many people will tell me, and the other side is I like to save time and money, because to me they go hand in hand. And when we go to work, we are literally trading our time for money. And a lot of people say, Denise, I don't have time to use coupons. So I think if I can use a $10 coupon and it takes me 10 minutes to do that, that $10 coupon at 10 minutes is tax-free money, okay? So I've already got my net income. If I'm doing that, I'm literally making $60 an hour if I do that on a consistent basis. So using some tools that are out there, and this is where my life skills of living on my own since I was 16, I didn't have anything. So I had to figure it out. If there's no safety net, you will figure it out. I was rebating, recycling my cans, using coupons. There are ways out there to make your money go farther instead of having to go out there and make more money. And I see money as a game. And I love playing the financial game of life and how can I strategize and work it. Then it changes. It's not money. It's money I get to play.
One of the biggest things I learned from your, and I've done this a long time, been involved in finance and helping people and sitting down with budgets, but one point that I had never considered, and it was so important to me and listening to your videos, was when you talked about having the children work for things, about how just because we have, perhaps you and I have a lot more that maybe we didn't get as a child, giving it all to our kids is a great disservice to them. And it really what it made me think about was my parents are 85. We have a big Italian family. I'm the youngest of 6. So my oldest brother's 20 years older than I am.
Wow.
And I remember, it made me reflect back on the fact that when I grew up, I had a paper route when I was 12. Yep. And then I worked in all kinds of restaurants all through high school. And even when I got to college, I worked in the casinos dealing blackjacks in the summer. I didn't get the paycheck. When I got the paycheck, I gave it to my father. And my father gave me an allowance. So I got a little bit back of my entire paycheck. So
it was expected.
Right. And this is because it's an older generation. And then I finished college in 3 years. So I got out a year early. Didn't get the partying senior year. I got to work a year between college and law school. And that all that money went to my father too, to pay off law school. But what he did was when I got out, he matched whatever I wanted to pay for my law school loans. He matched it, and that just lined up directly with everything you said. And I didn't realize how much the information you taught corresponded with what people thought is normal generations ago, and is just lost today on a culture that takes credit cards as being the norm. It's not, like you said, before it was a safety net, now it's the norm. But I mean, I didn't realize how much of an impact the way my parents raised me.
And what were you doing to your kids, too?
It's a lot different what I'm doing. I was giving my kids all the things I didn't have.
I understand.
And now when I listened to your thing, I said, I got to do this a little bit different.
It's good to have a plan. And I think for me, I'm way with you on that. When I was on my own at 16, I had nothing. I mean, I had nothing. So when I had a daughter and she's 13, 14, 15, I wanted to give her because I didn't have it. Right. But what I realized when I lost my mom was that if I continued to do that, I was doing her such a disservice, and I turned out great. So, I'm in a great financial position. I'm having the time of my life. But if I didn't have those tough times and earn the right to advance over a period of time, even getting a coffee table for my first apartment, I mean, instead of, a 2x4 with bricks. Right. And now with my daughter, she's got her own place. I want to buy the nice mat for her bathroom and nice towels, but I'm not helping her by doing that. I'm robbing her of her independence and of her own self-esteem because she accomplished. Just like with you, when you were going to work and you gave your dad and he gave you money back. I talk to the teenagers and I talk about, if you have gone out and worked at, say you're flipping burgers and you want to take your girlfriend to dinner and you say you can order anything on the menu. That's much different than if your mom gave you a $20 card and said, hey, you guys go to a movie on me. The guy gets that sense of, I'm providing for her, and so his self-esteem is big and he feels like he's giving versus, yeah, my mom's going to, give us $20, let's go to the movie. And I think that's very powerful. And when I talk to teens about that, they get that. They know it. They may want you to give them the money, but I'll tell you what, really inside, they don't. They want to learn to grow and be independent themselves.
Now, I've watched all the DVDs and I really enjoyed them, but I want you to tell us a little bit something about these that the viewers might not know. This one, Raising Financially Smart Children, which this is my personal favorite. But tell us a little about this video.
This DVD and a workbook is designed for parents to provide their children money as a life skill with lots of fun activities, field trips, things that they can do together to not only have some fun and develop the relationship, but really provide their children the life skills that they're going to need to deal with money every day of their lives. So people can watch this. It's a video that they can watch on their computer or on their television, and there's a workbook that you actually print out as many copies as you want, and you can use those exercises as you go through the program.
That's some great stuff on this one. This one is simple, practical solutions for dealing with money for the rest of your life, which everybody will have to do.
Yes, and this one's designed for adults. So it talks about financial organization. It talks about your credit score. It talks about a spending plan or budgeting. And my favorite in that one is there's a ton of money and time-saving tips at the end that really allow you to put a lot of, practical things into your day-to-day life. Very simple to do. Again, all of these are designed to not have to sit down and read a book. Right. You can watch them while you're folding laundry or cooking dinner.
Perfect. And her third video is your fast track to getting the best job in dealing with money for the rest of your life.
This one is designed for teenagers, and this is the program that I've been doing in the classroom for the last 15 years. And as I said earlier, teenagers don't want to listen to their parents or their teachers or pastors or principals. So this is designed for teenagers to watch independently. And I recommend that parents buy this for their teenagers and then pay them $10 an hour to watch it, and then ask for one sentence back on each one of the segments so that they know they've watched it. And this covers everything from getting a job to dealing with money. So how to prepare for an interview, how to dress, how not to get fired, how to deal with bank accounts and establish credit. All of that's in there. This one is really robust. It's a 2-hour program with an extensive workbook for the teenagers to actually go through the program on their own.
And aside from the videos, how else to get your message out there?
I'm truly a professional speaker in the sense that corporations, high schools, and colleges hire me to really come in and teach their employees, faculty, and students how to play the financial game of life, and really inspire and empower them in the area of personal finance, and have a little fun and be entertained along the way, because we realize that money affects every aspect of our life: productivity at work, our relationships, our health. So it's imperative that we really get a grip on this. And these aren't get-rich schemes. These are the financial foundations that we need in order to make the next level. I want to make sure that the rich and the poor, and we maintain a middle class, and it doesn't get further and further apart. And people need tools in order to do just that, and that's what I'm about.
Absolutely. Well, I really enjoyed the interview.
Pleasure.
Had some fantastic information.
Great.
We'd love to have you back again.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Many families here in Las Vegas and across the country have been devastated by the financial fallout of the past several years. And in order for our children to avoid experiencing the same type of repercussions, we have a responsibility as parents to make sure that they're financially educated. So make sure that you take the time and you take the effort to teach your children or get them the resources so that they can learn how to be more sophisticated consumers and more sophisticated and responsible as adults. Well, thank you for tuning into the show. And as per the norm, have a good week, fight the good fight, and don't let corporate America get the best of you.